All right, welcome back to the Fantasy Labs podcast. This is Bryan, the host. I am here with Bales and Tank. This is the Wednesday night podcast where we go over the entire NFL slate upcoming, starting with Thursday night and going over the Sunday and Monday games as well. So we got Week 10 finally in double-digit weeks. Had excitement this past week. We had a Fantasy Labs user take down second place of the Millionaire Maker tournament on DraftKings, which was awesome. So congrats to him, and hopefully we can set you guys up to do the same for this week. So we're going to go over the slate and kind of jump right into it just so we can get through the whole thing. We're going to go game by game, and we'll kick it off with the Thursday night game, which is the Bills at the Jets. And the over-under is 42.5 for this game. The spread is Jets minus 2.5. So it puts implied points for the Bills at 20 and Jets at 22.5. So, Tank, let's start with you. What are your thoughts on this game?
I expect this game to be, a pretty low-scoring affair, probably dominated by defense. I think both teams would try to establish the run with Fitzpatrick being hurt and, Tyrod still kind of working his way back off that injury. It was good to see Sammy Watkins have that huge game last week, but I think the matchup won't really dictate that kind of performance this week. Even though Revis isn't playing up to his usual status, he's still a solid corner, and he'll likely get the coverage on Watkins. So, I guess if you're looking for anyone in the pass game that might, have a splash, it'll be whoever's playing against Cromartie. LaShawn McCoy, Carlos Williams, both of those guys look good. And, Chris Ivory's always going to get his carries. And it's one of those situations where Ivory, even if he doesn't have a really good matchup, you have to also factor in that once they get in the red zone, he'll probably get, the brunt of the carries and maybe get some garbage touchdowns. I think he didn't really have a lot of yards last week, but put up a solid performance because he ran for like 2 goal line scores or something like that. So, that's one thing where you look at a matchup that doesn't seem that enticing. You always have to factor that in, how these guys are using the red zone that can, probably go in their favor, where otherwise it would be a pretty bad matchup.
Yeah, I like that point a lot about how so we look at the lines a lot and the totals, but maybe don't account as much as we should for players' usage and what sort of market share they're going to get of fantasy production on their team, and then what sort of market share they're going to have of red zone opportunities. So that's a really good point. In this game, don't really like anyone. The only player who I think is probably underpriced is Eric Decker. I think Decker, he would be an okay play. Bill's defense is decent, but Decker is underpriced relative to his ability to score, I think. The problem is he's going on Thursday night, so he might be a little bit over-owned. So you're running into potentially inflated ownership, but he's always lower-owned than I think he should be. He's not an elite receiver, but he's a second-tier receiver. He's a really, really good player. He's demonstrated the ability to convert in the red zone dating back to college. He did it with Tebow in Denver, so he can score. So he'd be the only guy that I'm really looking at in this game. He's back?
Yeah, at least I see him.
Yeah, what happened?
Yeah, I don't know. I was about to host there, buddy. Well, we're on to Panthers Titans. Over under 43.5.
I love it.
Which was Panthers at 24.5 implied points. Titans
You just got this
19,
now.
The lowest of the week. Tank.
Right? He's off. Hey, go ahead, Jay. Just get off now, man.
All right, screw y'all, okay?
All right, so with the Panthers-Titans game, I tell you one thing that impressed me was just Antonio Andrews getting the lion's share of the carries for Tennessee. He's one of those guys, if you always talk to Bales, he's like he doesn't really care about it being a superior athlete. At running back, it's more about the opportunities. I know that they just activated Cobb, but Andrews has been the more effective back. it seems like they're giving him more opportunities to be the man. And so he has a decent matchup here. So I think in like GPPs where you have a young quarterback where you're always going to lean on the run, and he could be an interesting play against the Panthers. I mean, Cam Newton has just looked amazing. I mean, that Titans defense kind of, you know, sometimes they play well, sometimes they give up a lot of yardage. I mean, what we've seen, you know, Atlanta versus what they did against Miami. I think, you know, the Panthers going in there on a roll. I mean, we saw what they did to Green Bay. I mean, Cam and those guys can have another great game. I mean, I like Jonathan Stewart, but at the same time, he's one of those guys that's the exact opposite of Chris Ivory, where he really doesn't get a lot of burn in the red zone. It's more so Cam, Olsen, and those guys. So I would probably tend to fade him unless he just has a superior matchup, which I don't think he has this week. Delaney Walker is like the man in Tennessee right now. I'm not sure if this is going to be something that continues. I mean, Malarkey used him a lot last week, and he probably exploded for one of the best scores for a tight end. I mean, I'm pretty sure probably Eifert was the only one that eked them out. But, you know, I really like him. But other than that, I mean, yeah, I mean, I think those are pretty much the guys I like. I mean, and Mariota, I mean, if you saw what Aaron Rodgers was able to do at the last half of that game, if Mariota can keep what he had going and, you know, take advantage of the opportunities opposite of Norman, then, you know, he could have himself a game too.
Yeah, this is a perfect game of players who I think are maybe underpriced, but also the types of players that I almost never roster. So it's going to be a really interesting decision for me. These players who I know are underpriced, I'm going to play them even though the types of guys I don't want to play. So, for example, Antonio Andrews, uncertain workload. Jonathan Stewart doesn't catch passes, doesn't see goal line carries. Even though I think he's underpriced, he's my fifth best value dollar per point. Almost certain not to play him. Ted Ginn doesn't convert in the red zone. Highly unlikely to play Ted Ginn. Dorial Green Beckham, I really like his talent. Don't know how they're basically in three receivers even with him on the field, and he is a rookie. Rookie receivers do better in the second half of the year, but still probably transitioning into that offense. So a bunch of players that I don't really like what types of players they are, and pretty much I would say I'm going to avoid the game even though they're underpriced.
Are you guys worried about David Cobb being activated for Andrews?
I mean, I think first game back, especially coming off an injury, he'll likely get maybe 5 to 7 touches at the most, especially after you've seen Andrews have some success being the main guy. I mean, I think what Cobb showed earlier in the year in training camp, they probably want to get a look at him, but I wouldn't see him coming in just straight off of, you know, the short-term IR and getting half the carries or anything more than that. So, I mean, I would expect limited participation just to try to get them back into the game flow. And then if they like what they see, they'll gradually try to work up his workflow in the next games moving forward.
Yeah, I'd say that makes sense. But even 5 to 7 touches cuts into that upside for Andrews.
Yeah. Yeah, that's my worry with Andrews. And then the rest of them I'm kind of not interested in. I agree. Okay, so let's move on to Bears Rams. Over under 42.5. Rams are 7.5 point favorite, so it puts implied at 17.5 for Bears and 25 for the Rams. So really low on the Bears. So I don't know. This is kind of a weird game. I think I like Alshon a lot, but that over under kind of worries me a little bit. Tank, what are your thoughts in general on this one?
I mean, I generally like Alshon. I mean, I had a lot of Alshon last week. This is a little bit tougher matchup with that Rams D. They're coming off a tough loss to Minnesota away last week. So now they get the Bears at home. The Bears have been turnover prone in prior years, but, I mean, they've been taking better care of the ball this year. You know, Langford looked really good last week against San Diego, but that was a prime matchup for him. I think it's going to be a tougher sledding against the Rams, and if they're not able to run the ball, the Rams get up, especially, you know, running the ball with Gurley against that Bears run defense, since they can get up and then put the Bears in predictable pass situations and then maybe get some turnover, stuff like that. So I see why the Rams defense is priced the way they are. I really like Gurley. An interesting play would be Tavon Austin, the way they're using him as basically a little pseudo running back / slot receiver. They'll probably like to try to get him going, especially in the dome. On the Bears side, like I said, that Rams defense is going to be tough. I mean, you could play Alshon. I mean, Langford, since AP was able to have some success, but at the same time, Minnesota's a better offensive team, I feel, at least with the line, than the Bears. So, yeah, I mean, I think if it's going to be any place to be the Rams defense, maybe Gurley and Tavon, even though, of course, Tavon is more of a GPP play than anything.
Yeah, I think that the two plays that interest me the most are Gurley and Alshon. Gurley, pretty obvious reasons. Good matchup. They're the favorites. They're at home. And he is super safe, even if he doesn't get targets, because I think I saw a stat that Jeff Fisher, when his teams lose by 7 points or more, his running back still gets an average of 24 carries. It's like an absurd number. They'll be down unexpectedly 10 points in the fourth quarter, and he's still trying to establish the run. He's just like literally the dumbest coach in the league. He is the most overrated. He just I don't get it. I just don't get it. He just like buys into all the typical coach dogma, just like punting on, fourth down and opponent, whatever. So Gurley's going to get the ball a lot no matter what. So I like him for that reason, even though I think there's some better values. I think we'll talk about him, but Darren McFadden, I think, is better value. D'Angelo Williams, Mark Ingram, potentially. And then Alshon I like because I think that this is about the cheapest that you're going to get a truly elite receiver and an elite scorer. They're going to have to go to him a bunch, obviously. He's like the only guy they have in the offense, pretty much, who right now is going to be that top-tier type of player. I don't care as much about the matchup. Alshon has scored a touchdown or gone over 100 yards in 9 of his past 11 games going back to last year. So I think he's an elite receiver, so I'm going to take that talent at that price pretty much regardless of the matchup. The matchup I think is bad, but I don't think it's like Seahawks level bad, right? It's just bottom half of the league bad.
Do you think it would make him lower owned this week?
I think he's going to be high owned. I think he's going to be high owned.
Doesn't matter.
Because of the price. I think people are a little bit sharper than that. But yeah, it's still going to drag down usage arguably lower than it should be, right? So it might be, I would guess, oh man, this is a complete guess, but I would say Alshon's going to be in 17 to 20% of lineups, maybe. Something like that.
That's fair.
Yeah.
So the big question for me is obviously is where you find cash game value. So I think Gurley, I agree, he's pretty safe. He's going to get the ball. But Alshon is the guy that I'm trying to figure out if I just that low implied points. Are you still fine with him in cash?
I would be okay with someone playing in cash. I don't know if I'm going to, because there's some other cheap receivers who I like a bit more that you can get Gurley in. You can go Rodgers if you want to go with him at quarterback. There's some other cheaper receivers who I think are better. But yeah, I would have no problem with it. I think that he's going to be fine, and I think he's getting a ton of targets. He's going to get, I think he's seen 31 targets the past 2 weeks, 16 and 15, something like that. So with that workload, don't care as much about the matchup. So I'd be fine with him in cash. And I'm not saying I won't have him in cash. I might. There's a few other players who I think are better values, but he's on
way to commit, Bales. Thanks for that.
Yeah, maybe.
Thanks. Just bringing so much value here. Cool. All right, let's move on. Browns Steelers this next game. Lowest over under 41. Steelers are 4.5 point favorites. Browns are at 18 and a quarter, and that puts the Steelers at 22.75. So obviously, D'Angelo, I think, is going to be one of the most popular guys. Yeah, he had that incredible game last week. Ben Roethlisberger is out, so Landry Jones is getting the start. You would assume that they would go heavy on D'Angelo, and the Browns are pretty bad as a run defense. So it seems kind of prime spot for D'Angelo. Is that what you're expecting, Tank?
Yeah, I mean, I think they announced a day or so ago that D'Angelo had an injury, but I don't think it's anything that significant. So,
Yeah.
that being said, you would expect them to lean heavily on him with Landry Jones being the quarterback now. I mean, this is also a prime matchup for the receivers as well, especially if those Browns cornerbacks remain out. The only thing is you have to expect them to play a little bit closer to vest with Landry being the number one quarterback. And I think what we saw in the earlier games when Landry was the quarterback, just based off of when you think about practice, when the starter goes, the backup is running like, a couple plays and running scout team stuff like that. I think Landry may have a better rapport with Martavis Bryant just because he was throwing with Martavis when, before he was activated. So I think he has a better rapport with him. So he'll probably be more inclined to target him than Antonio Brown maybe. So maybe there's an uptick for him in a really good matchup. I mean, one of the things we always talk about, if McCown is healthy, then Barnage is definitely a play. But if Manziel is active, then, Barnage's value goes down dramatically. I think if Manziel plays, then, the Steelers defense is in play this week. Other than that, I mean, AB is always in play. It's just you have to downgrade him a little bit with the change in quarterback. So, I mean, yeah, I think D'Angelo is the guy that jumps out to everyone in this matchup by far.
Yeah.
Yep, it's D'Angelo, I think, is pretty much the only player, definitely the only player that you can play in cash games, I think. Antonio would normally be that guy. I think it's too much risk with Landry Jones at quarterback. I just think that, there's better options in his price range that are who are much safer, and then better options who are cheaper. Heath Miller, I think, is potentially in play just because he costs $3,000. They've been going to him quite a bit. He's just underpriced, but yeah, I'm not going to have too much exposure to him. We mentioned the over/under in this game is pretty low. I don't think he has too much upside. He might potentially steal some touchdowns from D'Angelo, but I think D'Angelo's pretty much the only guy, and I'm probably going to roster D'Angelo in cash.
Yeah, his price has gone up over the last little bit, but I still think probably significantly lower than it should be to hit value.
Yeah, his price has gone up, but his role has changed. So when the price goes up and the role hasn't changed, that's bad. But obviously, I think he's severely underpriced in a really good matchup at 6,500.
Yeah, agreed.
The best matchup, actually, in terms of opponent plus minus.
Yeah,
I'm not sure you said that. No defense has given up more points above expectation to running backs than the Browns.
Yep, you're right. Cool. Okay, let's keep on going. Cowboys at Bucks. Over/under is 43. Bucks are actually 2-point favorites at home, so it puts implied points at 20.5 for the Cowboys and 22.5 for the Bucks. But I think that there's some intriguing plays, even though the Cowboys don't have super implied points. There's some intriguing plays. Dez, if he's able to play and get healthy, I know he's been battling stuff this week at practice. And then obviously I think McFadden's probably the best, actual value as far as, dollar per projected points this week. So, Tank, what are your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. Whenever you have, whether it's Council or Wheaton at quarterback, the Cowboys are going to lean on the run. Everyone knows that. So McFadden's definitely in play, and he's been getting the lion's share of the carries. So I'm definitely looking at him. We anticipated Dez having some upside playing against Toast in that Phillies secondary last week, and that came to fruition. He had himself a game. So it's good to see Dez get back. And I think whenever you see a guy coming back off that foot injury, you always want to wait a game or two before you feel comfortable that they're going to be healthy and, be able to last the rest of the season. I think we're seeing that with Dez. He's looked strong. He was able to explode, jump up, and catch the ball over fellow receivers and cornerbacks in the end zone. So good to see him getting healthy, and then his stock is only going to go up once Romo comes back. On the Bucs side, I mean, I think Mike Evans got 19 targets against the Giants, which is ridiculous. The only thing is, I mean, he just kept dropping the fucking ball. So I really don't know what to make of him. I mean, he had himself a game, but it could have been just monstrous if he could just catch the damn ball.
Was it 6 drops?
Yeah, it was ridiculous. I think
he didn't score either, right?
No, he didn't score.
Yeah, he could have had a huge game.
He had 20 targets.
I remember he dropped a deep pass down the sideline that I saw. I was watching on on red zone that was like he was going to go for like a 70-yard touchdown.
Yeah. And then there was another one where he actually got walked down. I mean, he had the opportunity to get like an 80-yard score from out. I mean, he's not really that blazer that's going to outrun a lot of folks, but it looked like he could have taken it to the house. So, I mean, looking at those plays, it would be frustrating. But, I mean, he's still a talented guy. He's the only guy to have to throw the ball too. So, in a matchup that's decent, I mean, you always have to look at him, especially when you're looking at GPPs. Doug Martin, I mean, the only thing is he had a fumble and then they rode Sims a lot. I mean, they've been pretty much splitting carries with those guys, so I don't know if you really want to touch them. And that's probably it, really.
Yeah, I think that McFadden is the obvious value, my top value at running back. Just getting so many carries. Anytime the Cowboys can run, they do run. Especially they were doing it with Roma, so they're especially doing it now with Castle, and they were doing it with Whedon. 1st and 10, 2nd and medium. They just run the ball all the time. He's going to get – I would say he's like – what's the over-under on his carries in this game? It's above 20, right? He's probably the favorite to get the most carries of any running back in the league.
Absolutely. And they use him in the pass game a lot too.
Yeah, he had 9 – I believe he had 9 catches against the Seahawks a couple weeks ago. So if they get down, he's safe. So I love McFadden. Eagles have a pretty good run defense too, actually, and he ran pretty well on them and got a ton of carries last week. So he's the top guy, probably definitely the only cash game play. And then 3 players to look at in tournaments just because they're such good pass catchers. Dez, obviously, Mike Evans, who you touched on, who I like a lot because I think he is a potentially dominant player. I don't care as much about drops as some other people. I care more about what the player does with the ball in his hands and how well he can convert red zone looks into touchdowns, which he definitely can do. I think he's like 249 pounds or something. That's huge. He's basically a tight end with receiver speed. And then their actual tight end, Safarian Jenkins, if he's back this week, I think is a really talented player who not many people are going to be on. You're probably looking at like between 1% and 2% ownership or something like that. So if Sean Lee's out, that could be a really sneaky play, I think, in tournaments.
Yeah. I've actually seen there's been a lot of stories that I've read that people are – I mean, I guess, 6 drops is a bad game, but I've seen people say that they're not going to use Evans this weekend just because they can't trust him and all this stuff. And that seems dumb, right? It's 20 targets.
They're false. Yeah, they're not going to stop using Mike Evans. That's crazy.
Right. Even with all the drops, I mean, you have damn near 20 targets, and then he still blew up for like, what was it, like maybe 8-9 catches for 150-something yards? Like,
150.
Who does? Yeah.
Yeah. There's a bunch of guys who would kill for that game, and that was about as bad of a game as he could have. So, so I think I'm still heavily on Evans as well, and I think that you could probably get him at a discount as far as ownership goes because of last week. So take advantage of that potentially. So let's move on. Lions at Packers is the next game. It's 47.5 over under, and the Packers are the biggest favorites of the weekend at 11. The Lions are at 18.25, and the Packers are at 29.25, which is the highest on the weekend. So in a potentially good spot to bounce back after a tough loss against the Panthers, and some encouraging signs even in that loss. Cobb looked pretty good. So, Tank, what are your thoughts on this one?
That's exactly what I was thinking before you said it. Bounce back game. I mean, you come off a tough loss to Denver and then Carolina. I mean, what's more perfect than having the Lions come into town and get back on track? And so, I'm really high on Rodgers. One thing that, just always sticks out to me just because I followed him for a while, like James Jones usually has really good games against Detroit, even though it normally takes place in Detroit for some reason. So I don't know if I want to jump on that train now or wait until they play in Detroit. But, I think it's one of those games where, if he doesn't get off this week, then it's going to probably be Devontae Adams. So I really like those guys. Like you said, Cobb was getting more integrate into the offense. And if you look at that last drive, I mean, I think 3 out of 4 plays he was looking at Cobb. So that was really good to see. They didn't really have an opportunity to convert on those plays, but good to see that his eyes are really focusing in on Cobb in the red zone. Really good matchup. I think Cobb is another guy that's priced really well to be an elite wide receiver. So definitely he's in play. I mean, also, if you want to be, the Detroit Lions, I mean, they're like the bad news Bears. I mean, they have all the talent in the world, but they just can't get it right. But, I mean, you look at Stafford, I mean, he has the opportunity to have a good game if they could put everything together. Same thing goes with Megatron. I mean, the Packers' run defense is pretty terrible. So if they could commit the one running back, say like maybe Amir Abdullah, maybe this is his game in the GPP where he gets off and explodes. But, I mean, those guys, I mean, all they are is GPP plays because, you really can't trust them. Another play that I really like, too, is the Packers' defense. When I look at the other games I didn't play this week, I think I probably like the Packers' defense better than most defenses this week just because the Lions are, they just can't fucking get right. I mean, they just keep stumbling over themselves. So I would expect the Packers to just take advantage of them early and then just pummel them down the line. So really like that Packers defense and then the other guys that I named on offense so far. Oh, and damn, James Starks, too. I mean, he has a great matchup against the Lions, too. And then they said that Starks is going to be the guy moving forward. So he's going to be well-priced and primed for a big game as well.
Yeah, you mentioned the defense. I think that's my favorite play in this game, and my favorite defense of the week is the Packers. So I want two things primarily in two main things above all else: the ability to rush the passer often and well, and then number two, a quarterback who will make mistakes when he's pressured. And you have both of those things. You have an 11.5-point spread. You have a team in the Lions projected at 18 implied points. Very, very low. And you have a quarterback who is going to take sacks and throw the ball all over the field. He doesn't give a shit. So I love the Packers against the Lions this week. That's my favorite play. I think that Rodgers is definitely underpriced now coming off those 2 poor games. He is, what is he, maybe 75, I think? Yep, 7,500. He's still the second highest quarterback, but he's $1,100 cheaper than Brady. He's 100 more than Breeze, who I think is arguably a better value, but I still like Rodgers quite a bit. The only thing that does scare me about that is the fact that they are 11.5-point favorites, and the Packers, there's a lot of times when Rodgers is so good early that he doesn't have a lot of attempts late, and they are a team that will run the ball late when they're up. They're not like, say, the Patriots, who will be up 14 and continue to throw. So there is some risk there with Rodgers, which makes me like a couple other quarterbacks that we'll talk about later who are a lot cheaper, perhaps more in cash games. And yeah, I like Cobb. He did break out last week, but I believe he didn't score right. He had 5 for 104, I want to say.
He had a touchdown too, though. He caught a touchdown on the wheel route. It was actually a pretty good route and throw and catch. So
Cobb scored, so he had 5 for 104 and a touchdown on 7 targets or something like that. Whatever it was. Okay, so yeah, I still think that he's what, 67 or 6,900. He's definitely underpriced, I think. Mm-hmm. Given I don't like that they spread the ball around so much, so I think his upside is maybe not as high as what people think. But yeah, he's definitely underpriced. And then Richard Rodgers, I think, he's my number one value and mathematically at tight end. It's probably because of the price, but I think that there is definitely an opportunity for him to score for sure in that offense. So, he could have 2 touchdowns any game.
What about Starks?
Yeah, he's it's just a player that I need to, I think, sort of monitor throughout the week. It's just so dependent on the workload, right? So if I think that he's going to get that, then he's an obvious value. Yeah. And if I think that he's going to split, then not.
Yeah, it's tough to tell. McCarthy did come out today and say that Starks is definitely their lead running back. So I don't know what that means, whether that means that he's going to get a ton of touches. Because I think if they do go, one primary running back and he gets a lot of touches. Obviously, a spread of 11 is something that's intriguing for a cheap running back. So,
sure,
it's interesting. But I also think this is a interesting week in that there's a lot of value at running back. I mean, like we've already talked McFadden and Gurley and a bunch of these guys, and we're going to get to Ingram and DeMarco and even Forsett and some other guys. So I think kind of once we get through, it'd be nice to try to evaluate and pick our best plays just because there's so many values. But yeah, so I think it's interesting. Even though he might be a really good value, it's just you can only roster so many. So let's move on. So Jaguars Ravens is the next game, and this game is high over under as well. It's 48. Ravens are 5.5 point favorite, so it puts Jags at 21.25 and puts the Ravens up at 26.75. So Tank, what are your thoughts?
I still need to go through everything, but I know Bortles is probably one of my favorite plays at quarterback this week, just with the matchup against the Ravens, regardless of matchup, the way they throw the ball around a lot. I really like him. I think, Robinson and Hearns, they're 1A, 1B. I think starting off the year, you thought maybe one guy would get off and then the other one would just have a poor performance. But honestly, both of these receivers have really good stat lines week in and week out. So I really like both of them. I think when you look at that Ravens run defense, actually Yeldon could be an interesting play because the Jags are a team that like to run the ball even though they don't run it well, but they've had some decent games when the matchup, presents itself. So this could be that game. On the flip side of it, just the way the Jaguars love to run the ball, love to throw the ball around. You would see maybe Flacco having to throw the ball a lot to try to keep up. They're going to try to establish the run. That's Harbaugh's mantra. So I really like Forsett in the run game and the pass game. I think another good play would be, Crockett Gilmore, just for the simple fact that, they don't have Steve Smith or needs someone to throw the ball to. Those tight ends have always been a huge part of that offense. And I think he's due to get off like he did earlier this year, so he could be a sneaky play. And then also Kamar Aiken just, taking over for Steve Smith. And yeah, I think it's one of those deals where just the way these teams play and the quarterbacks play, you could see one of these defenses taking the ball back like a pick six or something like that, but that'll be a damn crapshoot. That's something that you really can't try to predict the forecast. So, basically those plays are the ones I like, especially the Jaguar plays between Bortles, Robinson, and Hearns.
Yeah, I think that Bortles is the guy in this game. 5,600 last 4 games, 40 attempts, 29, 53, 33. He has 11 touchdowns, almost 3 per game over the past month. And he's played some decent defenses. He played the Jets and the Bills the past 2 weeks. He threw for 4 touchdowns and 381 on the Jets last week. So, I think Bortles is improving quite a bit. And I like him a lot, even in cash games. And I think I'm going to have Bortles. In cash this week, actually.
Whoa.
The Ravens defense is really bad. So their opponent plus minus against quarterbacks is plus 6.7. So they've added 6.7 points basically to quarterback scores on average per game, which is really bad. Only I believe the Saints are worse.
I was about to say, can I raise you the Saints?
Yeah, only the Saints are worse. So, yeah, I think it's pretty much a Bortles Cousins week. Those are the guys for me, I think.
Who would have thought that going into this year?
Yeah.
That's where have we come? Week 10, Bortles and Cousins are the guys that we're focusing on. Ooh.
Bortles is at least playing well, so he's exceeded his expectation every single game this year except for week 1. Cousins has sucked at times, so he's riskier, but Bortles has been good.
Yeah. I actually really want to talk about Cousins for a little bit. But yeah, I do agree on Bortles. He is kind of an elite play on the GPP side.
Cash side.
And cash side. Okay. All right.
Okay. I played Bortles on a couple of occasions in cash. I think I maybe got on the cash train earlier than most folks, and I mean, he paid it off every time, so I don't hesitate at all when he has a really good matchup to play him in cash, especially at that price point.
Yeah. All right, that's fair. That's fair. I can dig it. All right, Dolphins Eagles is the next game. Over under 46.5. Eagles are 6-point favorites. So puts Dolphins at 20.25 and the Eagles at 26.25. And it seems DeMarco is in a great spot. He's just been getting a ton of workload both in the rush and the passing game. They've just been establishing him a ton. And is fairly expensive, but seems to be still like pretty underpriced. So this kind of seems like a DeMarco game to me, Tank. What are your thoughts?
I mean, yeah. I mean, you like DeMarco. He's in a really good spot against that Miami run defense that, let Alfred Morris and Matt Jones just run crazy, and they haven't been able to run for shit the past maybe month of the season. So, I mean, that tells you all you need to know about that run defense. At the same time, I really like Lamar Miller, too. He's kind of the guy I was alluding to earlier in the podcast where there's a guy that has a really bad matchup. I think he may have only run for like 20 yards or something like that, but at the same time, he was effective in the pass game, and he had 2 rushing touchdowns in the red zone. So even though he didn't have the yardage that you would like, you get 2 scores, and then shit, everything's gravy for you. So, I mean, he's always in play, especially at 5,400. I think with the matchup against that Philly pass defense, my boy Toast, man outside, I think this could be a sneaky play for Rashard Matthews. I mean, I think he's due to get off earlier this season. He was having some huge games, even had some huge ones against Buffalo. And I'm not sure who Maxwell is going to be on, but whoever that cat is on, I mean, they're primed to have a really good game. So if it's Matthews or maybe Stills, I mean, they could be a sneaky GPP play. Tannehill could have himself a game. If you look at the Eagles side of the ball, I mean, if they commit to Murray, then, he's definitely in play. I'm waiting for Ertz to get off. The only thing is, I mean, the way they kind of distribute the ball around the pass games, those guys are so erratic. You just have to make sure you pick the right pony, whether it's Ertz or Matthews, who finally kind of came on and had himself a good game. So maybe they go to him a little bit more this game and just try to reestablish himself because he had so many drops early on in the season that you can tell he lost his confidence. That's why I think he was so excited to kind of get that game clinch and play against the Cowboys last week. So maybe this is another game where they try to go to him early and establish him as that number one guy because if they're going to do anything later in the year, they're going to have to find a go-to guy to lean on in the pass game, and he's the best bet.
Yeah, Rashard Matthews is interesting. I like him in theory, but he's not getting the ball enough. So he had 12 targets a couple weeks ago, but then the other 4 games around that, so 4 last week, and then 3 weeks ago, 3, 6, and 3. So, I mean, no receiver really is going to be good enough to convert, to have a lot of upside and really even provide value with that amount of targets. So that's the problem for me. I love the idea of it, though, because they're probably going to have to throw, and they're probably going to run a lot of plays against the Eagles. So that's sort of the allure of playing offensive guys against Philly. Same sort of idea with Tannehill. I think that DeMarco is probably the most interesting play to me. Lamar Miller might be the most underpriced player in the game. I think that he probably is. But, they are touchdown underdogs. I'm not that confident that he is going to see a bunch of targets if they get down. He saw 7 last week. But other than that, he sees a moderate number of targets in the passing game. So I think that Lamar Miller is definitely in play. Not for me in cash games. I would play him in tournaments for sure, and I will. And then DeMarco. Otherwise, probably.
Any Philly receivers?
No, not for me.
Okay.
Yeah, I think you can trust any Philly receivers in cash. I mean, like I said, maybe they try to establish Matthews and maybe he could be a GPP player or something like that, but they spread the ball around a lot, and those guys, I mean, they really haven't – no one has really stepped up, so it's hard to, be able to just pencil someone in as a dependable, reliable threat.
I think you could argue for Jordan Matthews in tournaments. The Dolphins' pass defense, I know, has been really, really poor. They will throw the ball a bunch. I think he's another guy who's been sort of underrated because of his drops. Then he broke out last week, but that was after prices had come out on Sunday night. So he was 6,400 last week, and they played the game, but pricing had come out. He broke out a little bit. I think he had 30 points or something against the Cowboys. Now he's 6,200 in a better matchup. So, probably underpriced. I wouldn't have a problem with it, but I still wouldn't trust him in cash games. He's still seeing a decent number of targets, so I don't think it's a huge problem. But yeah, it's more of a tournament play for me.
Cool. Fair enough. All right, so let's move on to the matchup we've been waiting to talk about, the Saints at the Redskins. They are over-unders 50.5. Saints are just a point favorite, so puts implied points at both teams pretty high. Saints are at 25.75, and the Redskins are at 24.75. And I actually have this stat pulled up with the exact number. So the Saints have allowed 8.9 fantasy points more than expectations, which is just ridiculous. So Kirk Cousins is going to be the guy that we're all talking about this week. So Tank, are you okay with that? Are you okay with the Kirk Cousins train this week?
Man, I fucking hate Kirk Cousins, dog. I mean, I hate him, but in this matchup, you have to look at him. I mean, this guy, I'm looking right now, he threw up 35 or 34, almost 35 against Tampa Bay. And that New Orleans defense, like I was trying to justify him, coming back and having a bounce-back game against Tennessee, playing in the Dome, getting the win, and then they were shitty again last week too. Yeah. So now you're going to go on the road and try to play well? I think Cousins probably has himself a game. If you look at him against New England, actually Cousins he probably played the best out of everyone on the offense. Like Garcon dropped the ball. Jordan Reed dropped the ball. Crowder dropped the ball. Like everybody dropped the fucking ball. So you really couldn't blame Cousins. So, I mean, I'm looking for Cousins to go in and have him another. You like that, don't you? I mean, that's going to be against the Saints. He's going to give it up. So, I mean, but if you ask me which quarterback I like between Cousins and Breeze the best, Cousins is GPP, of course. Breeze, you pay up for him, and he's a great cash play against that Washington. Cousins cash. Shit. You know what happened if you play Cousins in cash. But also, you look at these receivers. I think there's a lot of good plays like New Orleans trying to, get Cooks more involved. You still have Snead. You have Mark Ingram, who has a really good matchup. I like Ben Watson in the past game. He's been having consistent targets like the past 2-3 weeks. You flip it over to Washington, I think they're trying to switch over more to Matt Jones, and Matt Jones has a really good matchup against the Saints run defense. Then you have Pierre Garcon. I think my favorite receiver is Jordan Reed, but then you have Deshaun Jackson coming back against that pass defense, and so he could explode, and he's a great value. So, I think there's a lot of interesting plays. This could be similar to that Saints-Giants game where if you pick the right ponies in this one, they could blow up and they can win you, a few $100,000 or $1 million easily.
Yeah, I think I already said how I feel about Cousins, and I do think you should look at him in cash.
Yes. Don't say it.
We should do a head-to-head this week, and I'll guarantee I have Cousins as my quarterback.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
All right. Yeah, we should. I'll go Cousins. So I think that he is severely underpriced in a really good matchup and is going to have to air the ball out. I'm irrationally confident in him. He and Bortles, I think. There's a good chance that I actually only play Bortles and Cousins in cash. And then someone that you can make an argument for, I think, in any league type, especially tournaments where you have to have some exposure given how he's playing. He looks healthy, is Drew Brees. And you don't even necessarily –
even on the road?
Yeah, I don't care that much. He's 7,400. He's $100 cheaper than Rodgers. He has 10 touchdowns over the past 2 weeks. Pretty good Vegas implied total. Unless the weather's bad, there's something. He's throwing the ball so much. They're only projected to win by 1 point on the road, so he's probably going to have to throw it quite a bit. Yeah. I like Breeze. I should say I will have some exposure to Breeze. Not sure who I would stack with him. Maybe no one. Maybe Ben Watson. Probably Ben Watson.
Yeah. So the interesting thing to me is if you go Cousins in GPPs, who do you stack with him, or do you go naked Cousins? I guess
Probably Jordan Reed.
Jordan Reed, right? Yeah, that's my thought too. Who's underpriced, especially in this matchup.
I don't like to play someone like Deshaun because people think that receivers like that are high upside, and I don't think that they are because he's so dependent on long touchdowns. The chances of him getting a really long touchdown are already low. But even if he has that, then that's like a normal game. He basically needs 2 long touchdowns to provide really high upside, like Antonio Brown level upside or something like that.
Yeah.
Which is just like it's just a very low probability of someone like Deshaun Jackson. Like if you look at Mike Wallace, for example, is a similar type of receiver, and look at his career yardage. His career high in yards is like 140 or something, and he doesn't score. He just has limited upside. I think Deshaun is actually the same type of player, and then Pierre can't even get deep and also can't score. So I don't really like him.
Fair enough. So is there a quarterback in the NFL that wouldn't hit value against the Saints?
Well, yeah.
Who?
A starter?
Sure.
Let me look.
There's not one.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe Matt Castle.
Castle Train if they play the Saints,
Maybe Matt Castle. I think is the worst starter in the league.
Man, I actually think Castle would probably throw for I would do the over on 2 tubs for Castle against the Saints.
Well, how many yards?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, I would say he would probably go for
70 yards.
maybe 250.
Okay. Yeah. All right. I think that's fair.
Which it would hit a value on Matt Castle, right?
I don't think. I think that the over under on touchdowns would be maybe 1.4 or something now.
Whether it's 1.4, I would go over to 2.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough. All right, let's keep on moving. Next game is Vikings Raiders. There's no over under, but the Raiders are 3-point favorites. So we're not exactly sure how many points Vegas is expecting, but we do have that spread. So interesting games. Raiders have looked actually really good this year. Carr continues to look great. Was in that lineup that the Fantasy Labs guy had with that took down second place. So obviously, he's kind of turned himself into a cash game play almost every week. Tank, what are your thoughts?
I mean, I really like Carr. I don't like him as much this week as I did last week. I definitely had him going last week. I think that Vikings pass defense is a little bit tougher, but it's not like they can't get beat. Who I really like and who really stands out is Adrian Peterson, even though this is a tougher matchup than you would think because that Raiders run defense much improved from last year. But just watching Peterson last week, I don't know if it was the fact that he was going against that Rams defense or competing with Gurley, who's supposed to be the next AP coming. He looked really good. They made a concerted effort to try to get him going, and the reads he was making, the way he was exploding in the line, I really like what I saw. And so this is one of those things where it may not be the ideal matchup for him, but just the way that they're trying to, get him going here later in the season, I think they want to lean on him. I really like him. If Teddy's playing, then I like Diggs. I think this is a really good place for Diggs. On the Raiders side, I mean, does Crabtree cool down this week? Because that dude has been off the chain, and so he's just been playing phenomenal ball, and one of those guys is probably primed to get off. I'm not sure who it's going to be, but Amari, Crabtree. They're in a decent spot. Like I said, not as good as last week, but decent spot. And then I think Latavius Murray is banged up right now. That Vikings defense, they have been playing pretty well against the run, but then Gurley had himself a game. But we look at that, Gurley and Peterson are phenomenal athletes. So I think you have to discount Murray. You can't have the same expectations for him. But the Raiders like to, give him a good amount of carries. So, he could be an interesting play if healthy.
I think we have a line on the game now.
Oh, do we? Okay.
23.5 for Oakland,
Okay.
20.5 for Minnesota.
So low over under. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if I love too many players in this game. I think two receivers who are probably underpriced are Crabtree, who Tank touched on, just going crazy, and I prefer him to Amari. And Amari's presence on the opposite side of the field, I think, is why Crabtree is doing well and is also pretty safe. He's not going to get doubled much. They're still going to go after Amari, I think. And then Stephon Diggs. I actually think that I might play Stephon Diggs even if Bridgewater's out, because at 5,100, he's coming off of one bad game. But before that, he had 12, 9, 9, and 10 targets in his previous 4 games, 2 touchdowns in the prior 2, over 22 points in 3 of 4. So that they are obviously trying to get him the ball. He's coming off of just the one game with a few targets. So I think that Diggs at 5,100 is still in play, regardless of the quarterback.
Yeah, and 2 points just to add on that. I think, Diggs had a tough matchup last week. Another thing is this, Diggs really just came on, I would say, in the last month. Before that, he was probably running scout team with Sean Hill. So if you think about who Hill has a better rapport with, it'd be Diggs versus, the other wide receivers.
Oh, great. Yeah, that's a great point. That is a great point. And I did some research that suggested that quarterbacks and receivers do actually build rapport in the first year, and then after that it sort of levels off, but that first year is important. So I hadn't actually thought about that, and I like that. And he did have a tough matchup against the Rams last week, and now he's at the Raiders, who are much better against the run, I think, than the pass.
Yeah. So the question always, like when the Raiders are playing, is which player is going to take advantage of their bad defense in the middle of the field? Usually it's a tight end, but I don't think that, Jared Cook is a guy that you're going to – or Kyle Rudolph, is a guy that you're going to look at particularly. So Tank, for you, who's that guy that could really get into the middle and take advantage?
On the Vikings, the only guy I'm really looking at receiver-wise is Diggs. I can do some long-winded answer, but I don't like anyone else but Diggs right now.
I don't think you can play anyone but Diggs. Rudolph has 6 targets in the last 3 games.
Yeah, that opponent plus minus looks good, but
yeah, you can't play Rudolph. I don't think you can.
Okay, yeah, that's fair enough. Okay, let's keep moving. Next game is Chiefs at the Broncos. This is the second lowest over-under. It's 41.5. Broncos are 6-point favorites. Puts the Chiefs at 17.75 and Broncos at 23.75. So not much scoring here. Tank, what are your first thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I actually expected the Broncos to have a better game against the Colts last week. So, yeah, I can see this one being a really low-scoring game. I think Aqib Talib's going to be out, so that Broncos defense won't be at 100%. The Chiefs were actually playing better ball going into the bye week, just roughing up the lines, if I'm not mistaken. And they're playing in Denver. So, I think this game will be played pretty close. The Broncos have a really good run defense at the same time. Kendrick West really established himself as the guy overseas a couple weeks ago. So, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. I don't think there are any matchups that I just love in this one. I think if it's anything, maybe Kelsey. I don't know. There's some decent plays. Maybe someone would stand out. I really can't choose one right now. Honestly, just thinking about it, as we talk through it, I would probably avoid most players in this one. I just don't have that much confidence in them.
Yeah, even on the Denver side?
On the Denver side, I mean, that KC pass defense was pretty terrible early on in the year, but they've gotten better as the seasons progress. I think because they got Sean Smith back and some other guys. So, I mean, of course I love Demaryius. I love Emmanuel Sanders, but I really don't anticipate them just going out and having these huge games. Like, I could just call it like that. Like, I feel like there are better matchups and price points out there than those guys.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the only I like Demaryius, I think, who is just had the worst luck this year in terms of a variety of statistics, but especially in the red zone. He has 1 touchdown this year. I mean, that's just crazy. We know that he can convert. They haven't moved the ball, obviously.
He led the NFL last year.
Yeah, he's ridiculous. He can convert at a high rate. He should see a huge share of the red zone looks. He's dropped a couple. They haven't thrown to him as much, and there's been some bad throws. And just there's no way that a player like Demaryius should be priced where he is. And then in tournaments, Emmanuel Sanders right below him, $100 less. And we saw this last week where I played Demaryius in tournaments. Emmanuel went off. Emmanuel was $200 cheaper, I think, last week, 73 and 75, if I'm not mistaken. And when you look at that, almost everyone is going to roster Demaryius, right? He's the better player. He has more upside, and he's only $100 more, so he's probably a better value. But last week I forget what league it was. It was maybe I think it was the 300. He was Emmanuel was 4.4% owned, and Demaryius was in over 21%. And had I known that, I would take Emmanuel every time. There's no way that he is roughly 5 times less likely to produce X ceiling than Demaryius, right? Yeah. He's still in a pretty good spot. So I think Emmanuel is arguably the better tournament play, and because psychologically people are just going to pay $100 more for Demaryius, they recognize same team, same situation, better player. Probably Demaryius is going to, I think we'll see roughly the same ownership on those players.
So I guess I would have guessed the opposite, that people would usually take the cheaper player just to upgrade elsewhere. But I guess they thought that the difference was huge.
No, I think that I think that is the case in most situations, but not with teammates, right? This is a number 1 who's 74 and a number 2 who's 73. I should have thought last week that, yes, Demaryius is going to have much higher usage, and he did. And he should have higher usage. It just shouldn't be that much of a difference, I think.
So are you interested in either one of them this week?
I'm interested in both.
Okay. Sounds good. Let's keep moving. Patriots-Giants is the next game. Over-under is the largest by far, by 5 points. So at 55 right now. Patriots are 7.5-point favorites, which is the lowest they've been in a while. So it could be a little bit closer. Puts the Patriots at 31.25 and the Giants at 23.75. So Tank, what are your thoughts on this one?
I mean, after seeing what Drew Brees was able to do against that Giants defense, I mean, you have to believe my boy Tommy is licking his chops right now.
Touchdown Tom.
Okay, so, I mean, you definitely like Brady. You know, he's the highest priced quarterback, rightfully so. I mean, he's throwing the ball regardless of how high they're up. So, like him. I mean, one interesting thing I was thinking about when I was watching film today is that, you know, even though that offense is centered around Gronk, he's the machine that makes it go. I think the one guy who benefits from that the most, I mean, it's obviously Edelman. I mean, Gronk can have his moments. It's like sometimes Gronk will have a couple of games in a row, and then once that happens, he's due for regression. I wanted to play Gronk last week, but I saw that he already had 2 solid games back-to-back, so I didn't play him. But I think regardless of that, like, Edelman is always going to get his fair share. I mean, I think that's why he's just the ultimate cash player. Like, he's always going to be the man that's going to, you know, get looks and get, you know, touchdowns and all that stuff in that offense. So, I mean, I think going into this season, we were all enamored by Gronk, and, like, you know, you have to try to fit Gronk in the lineup whenever you can. I mean, even though he's a stud and he's known for busting out and having those huge games at the same time, I mean, there's someone that I want to put in my lineup week in, week out, is going to be Edelman over all those other guys. I mean, that being said, I mean, you have to like Gronk. I like the way they're using LaFell now. He's actually getting some targets in the red zone too. You saw how Tommy Boy liked to throw fades to him last year once, he built that relationship with him. So he's always an interesting play. And then on the flip side, you have Eli, who's likely going to have to throw the ball around a lot to, keep pace. So Eli comes into play. Vereen comes into play. Of course, OBJ. And then you have to look at those other, outside factors, whether it's Ruben Randall or Dwayne Harris or some guy like that, someone who has to fill in opposite OBJ. So, I mean, I think those are the interesting plays this week. And then, of course, the New England defense, just because sometimes Eli has those Eli moments. And when he gets that shitty face, more than likely he's thrown like 3 interceptions and had a couple sack fumbles and stuff like that. So that's always in play with Eli. And it hasn't happened in a while, so he may be due.
Yeah, I think that one thing that helps that is the Patriots are over a touchdown favorite. So, yeah, he's going to have to throw the ball most likely in low percentage situations, right? He's going to have to throw some bad passes, which is always fun with Eli. I think Brady and Gronk are pretty clearly overpriced, or at least not. There's better values. So Brady's $1,100, I think, more than any other quarterback. Gronk is, let's see, 1,700 more than any other tight end. They're so expensive. So there's a huge cost that comes with rostering those guys. Unless you love some cheap players across the board, it's really tough to fit those guys in. So I think that they're more GPP for that reason. But you do need to have exposure to them in tournaments because they could just go completely off. Such high upside, and by far the highest implied team total. I think better for cash games are both LaFell and Edelman. LaFell being the best value on the Patriots by far, I think, because of what Tank said, he's getting targets. For me, probably only a cash game play. I think some people are going to be lured into him in tournaments, but he's going to have high ownership, number one. Number two, they spread the ball around so much that not sure he's going to have that many opportunities to have a really big game. He might, but I just don't think there's a great chance of it. I still would consider him, but the ownership scares me more because people are now onto him so much, and he's a great value. Edelman, potentially overpriced at 8,200 slightly, but I still like him in cash games because his floor, he never is going to provide fewer than 10 points, more like 15 points, and his he's just so safe because of the types of targets he sees, because of Gronk's presence. He's going to see like 8 targets that are probably within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage or something that he's highly likely to catch. So he's just such a safe play. And then on the Giants, I think I don't really like too much, but the one play for like talking about the narrative of the Patriots, what do they do well? They take away the opponent's top option. They're going to try to stop Odell, which makes sense. If you stop Odell, the Giants' offense sucks. They really don't have anything besides Beckham, right? Like they're not very good. Mm-hmm. Eli was never good before. He was not good. He won the Super Bowls. He's the luckiest quarterback probably in the history of the NFL in terms of winning. It's crazy. He was not a good quarterback before Odell. Certainly not in terms of fantasy. So they're going to try to take out Odell, and then so that would probably leave Ruben Randall singled up quite a bit. So I think that you could make a case for Randall in tournaments. Definitely not cash games.
What do you think about Vereen stock?
I just don't. Yeah, maybe. I guess I haven't considered him maybe as much as I should. I guess I don't really have a great opinion on him or a great take.
Yeah, so we had that big Gronk game obviously in the first week where he went off with 3 touchdowns, but hasn't had double-digit touchdowns since then. So you would assume that it's coming at some point. So yeah, DraftKings keeps his price up, but you kind of just have to have some exposure and have to pay it just in case he goes off for those 3 touchdowns. Bales, would you say that LaFell is probably the best wide receiver value on the slate for cash?
Yeah, he is. He is. Yeah, I think he is.
Okay. And the kind of last question, Tank, how would you deal with the Patriots running situation?
I think the only guy that you can really put faith in right now is LeGarrette Blount. I know a lot of people are on James White and expecting him to be the one that's going to take Deion Lewis's place. And that could be true, but, I think a lot of people would probably be scared off for the simple fact that Brandon Bolden got some of that receiver action last week, probably because he was active for special teams and they really didn't expect – and they had James White down. So I think they'll probably have those three backs up. Bolden will more than likely go back into a special teams role, and then they'll use White in that kind of, third down back role. But, you really don't know with the Patriots until you see it. So, I think the only one right now you can put your faith in is LeGarrette Blount.
Yeah. Bales, what's your thoughts on Blount? He had 29 attempts last week, which is just crazy.
Yeah, I'm just too scared I just don't. Yeah.
That's fair.
I just would rather avoid the situation, especially with James White now coming into the mix, and I don't know. I'm just not on it.
Even in tournaments, because right now he's at 4,900. So I think a lot of people are going to look at him and McFadden, who's are the exact same price, and probably go McFadden. So maybe a pivot.
Yeah, I think you can make a case for that. Has seen 1, 2.
And Starks is 4,900 too.
Blount has 3 targets this year, right? So he has no upside in the passing game. He's completely dependent on getting and on scoring, and he's scored. It's not like he's scoring that much. He scored 2 times in the past 5 games. They throw if they didn't have Gronk, he would be a much better play because anytime they get inside the 5, they probably go to Blount instead of Gronk. But right now they look at Gronk, so I'm just not on him.
Okay.
Yeah, but I think one thing worth noting at the very least is that, of course, the Patriots have to love to go after their team's weakness. And even though the Giants are pretty bad against the pass, especially what we saw when they played New Orleans, they're 25th against the run. They give up 4.3 yards per rush, and teams average about 115 yards per game against them. So, Blount could be a sneaky play. And then especially with Deion Lewis going down, and with Bill, you have to earn his trust. And so I can see him leaning heavily on LeGarrette Blount until someone does that. So, it's definitely worth considering at the very least.
Did you experience that when you were there? How did he treat you when you were new? And did it change as you
Yeah, with Bill, he's one of those old school coaches where you have to earn your stripes, whether it's your consistent play on the field or consistently being able to, have the right response to questions in the meeting room. He wants to make sure you have a complete understanding of, what they want from you, whether it's in the classroom, on the field, and know that they can depend on you to give that consistent production. And until you can do that, they really won't give you an opportunity. You see, if they think they have a beat on you, they'll give you an opportunity. Jonas Gray, you fuck up, then you're on the bench the rest of the season. So it's not about just having this, this skill set where they just love you and you show that you can run for 250 yards. They want to know that they can depend on you, have that consistency. So until you really show that on a regular basis, then, I think LeGarrette's going to be that guy.
All right.
Yeah. Somewhere Stephen Ridley is watching this podcast and nodding his head in agreement. So cool. We got 2 more games left. Cardinals at Seahawks is at 45. So this is the Sunday night game. Seahawks are 3-point favorites. Cardinals are at 21, and the Seahawks are at 24. So, Tank, thoughts?
I think this is going to be another one of those games that's played really close to the vest. We see it's the really low point total for the over-under. One thing that just jumped in my head was, this is a totally different game, totally different year, but I remember that game Marshawn Lynch had against the Cardinals last year. I think that was in Arizona. and he just exploded, had a really good game. And then the Cardinals were known to have a really good run defense at that time too. And that kind of plays on the one game I referenced earlier this year where Adrian Peterson was playing the Rams maybe a few years ago, and he had a 2-yard run, 1-yard run, 3-yard run, then he exposed for like 67. I mean, this could be one of those plays for Marshawn Lynch. I think they're going to try to lean heavily on him to kind of, because, it's getting colder. It's supposed to be raining up there in Seattle too, so they're going to want to lean heavily on the run game. I mean, this could be a game where you see Jimmy Graham more involved just because of the conditions. At the same time, I think, playing against the Seattle defense, playing in those conditions, you have to temper your expectations for that Cardinal offense. So, we've seen Carson Palmer, Larry Fitzgerald, all those guys ball out the early part of this year. I don't know if they're really going to be in line for that kind of game this week. I think the defense would definitely be in play, whether it's slick balls, going into tip balls for interceptions, pick sixes, strip, sack, fumble, stuff like that. So when you have really good defenses playing in these conditions, I think they're always in play. But having a running back like Marshawn Lynch where he's going to get the lion's share of the carries, I think, he's one of the guys that just ultimately jumps out to me.
I'm not playing anyone in the game.
Tell us how you feel, Bales.
I think that I don't have anyone. I don't have anyone that's a good value. I don't think there's a lot of upside. I don't like the game.
Okay. You want to talk about something else?
Yeah, let's talk about
Christmas carols.
Christmas carols, yeah.
Okay, we'll move on to the last game then and wrap it up. So Monday night game, Texans at the Bengals. Over-under is 47. Bengals are heavy favorites, so this is the second biggest spread behind the Packers. They're at 10.5 over the Texans. So it puts the Texans at 18.25 and the Bengals up at 28.75. So it could be some potential nice sweats on Monday night for the Millie Maker if you have some Bengals on your side. So interesting game for sure. Tank, what are your thoughts on this one?
Man, if you're expecting the Bengals to be up a lot, then, that means DeAndre is going to see a lot of targets. And he's one of those guys, even though it's not the best matchup, he's just a phenomenal talent. He makes just awesome catches, runs really good routes, can run away from defenders. So he's always in play. I think I don't put Jonathan Joseph in the class with Maxwell, but he comes close at times. And so I think A.J. Green is definitely in play this week, especially after Eifert having a 3-touchdown banger on Thursday night. So either A.J. Green, maybe Marvin Jones, those guys on the outside, they get off. They've been using a little bit more of Gio than Jeremy Hill, so I think you kind of stay away from those guys just because you don't get the number of carries that you want out of them. Staying away from all Houston running backs. Hoyer, this isn't a great matchup for him. I think anyone that you're looking at on a Houston team is DeAndre, and that's it. If they're focusing on DeAndre, maybe Nate Washington, he's been sneaky good this year. Just looking at the wide receivers, but that's about it on Houston.
Yeah, I think that you have to look at DeAndre because of the targets. Nate Washington is a little bit interesting at 4,400, and he saw 6 targets last week. He scored. He saw 16 the week before against the Dolphins. And then similar to DeAndre, just a player who's so talented is Tyler Eifert, obviously, who I had heard from someone, I forget who it was, that they haven't even been scheming to get him the ball in the red zone. They're just like, there's not even plays like that have been drawn up for him. He's just like open and really good. And he is a really good player. I think that the Bengals are it's just a tough matchup for the pass catchers. I don't know if there's a ton of upside there. I do like A.J. Green a lot though, who is probably, I think, underpriced. He's $200 cheaper than Dez, who is obviously hurt or still coming back from the injury. $600 cheaper than Julian Edelman. playing on Monday night at home with the thing that's most surprising to me in this game are these totals. I actually don't know why the Bengals are at 28.8. That's really surprising to me. And then 10.5-point favorites. But that implied total is really high. And just because of that, you start to look at the Bengals running backs maybe. But, in terms of value, I don't know that there's too much there. Other than Bengals defense, I think, is very interesting because of what I just said, the total, the fact that they're going to be up, and hopefully in a situation to rush the quarterback quite a bit late in the game.
Yeah. I agree with that. Eifert is definitely interesting. It's kind of the guy that stands out to me. So before we go, Bales, I kind of just wanted to recap because I think the interesting thing this week is there's probably maybe 6 or 7 guys at running back that I'm okay with playing in cash, which is kind of seems like a high number. So are there like 1 or 2 that stand out above the rest for you?
McFadden stands out above everyone else to me.
Because of the volume?
I think it's McFadden and the price, obviously.
Yeah.
But that combination and then everyone else.
Okay.
I think then.
So he's like
then
a must-cash guy.
I think so. I think he is. Yeah, he's my top guy. And then I think you're starting to look. I think D'Angelo's the next one up for sure. And then you're looking at Gurley, potentially Mark Ingram, who we really didn't talk too much about. Who's a little bit riskier because of the type of player he is. But I think McFadden is much higher than the other guys.
Okay.
How do you feel about Forsett, just knowing that, they're probably going to have to throw the ball around a lot. They love to establish the run. They're playing against Jacksonville, so it may be a higher scoring game. And his usage in the run game and pass game, it seems like he may be a little safer than most, even though I like those other guys better. But I think Forsett at 6,000, he could be an interesting play just by his usage.
Yeah. I have Forsett fairly high, and I think he's in that next tier, that mix that Bryan talked about. I would put him in with Ingram, D'Angelo, Gurley, and potentially even DeMarco in that range.
Cool. Sounds good. All right. Well, we will end it there. Thanks for watching and listening. Shoot us any questions you may have. And good luck. Hopefully one of our users here at Fantasy Labs will take second place. Heck, maybe even take down the first place $1 million. So good luck to you in week 10, and we'll see you guys next Wednesday night.